live. Wakey, wakey. Another good day that the good Lord has afforded us. And of course, today, you know what happens every Tuesday. We have people and politics coming your way, where we take a keener look at that, brother, or for that matter, at the politics of the week that has been. So a lot has been happening, of course, when it comes to fighting corruption. And of course, also today is a big day in Kenya, knowing that President Uhuru Kenyatta is or has met President Trump way back at Washington, and we'll be giving you details of this as well. But also joining me this morning is Senator Aaron Cheriot. Good morning, good to see you.
Good morning, Debarl.
And many thanks indeed for coming this morning.
Thank you.
So, of course, intrigues of last week must have caught you by surprise, especially the Ipsos Synovate poll. What was your take on that?
Well, it didn't catch me by surprise. I'd say that it's something that has been happening for quite a while.
Yes.
This perpetual desire to demonize and tarnish the character of the deputy president by certain quarters. I want to believe his political enemies and people who consider him to be a threat either to their present or their future political being. And therefore, there's nothing unusual. In politics, we learn to expect everything. And therefore, I don't think it's anything that would shake him or his support base. Kenyans are way smarter than that, because when you conduct such a poll where you go and ask people, who do you perceive to be the most corrupt? What kind of a poll is that? Because the question will be, what tools do the people have to measure? You know, when you do an opinion poll, at the end of it, it's an empirical process where at the end of it, people are supposed to give answers which they can justify, and they have good reasons.
So from your own estimation then, what will have been the metrics? If you say empirical,
I don't think, because I don't think the metrics can be available, because how do you measure? If I come into this room and ask the people that are in this room right now, the five of us, who do you think is the most corrupt among us? What do they have? What tool?
But at the end of the day, it's all about perception, right?
You know,
and
yeah,
this has
that's precisely my point, that this was just a pure political tool. This was a sponsored opinion poll. I don't think.
Could it be that one of the metrics they're using is the media, right? According to a lot of reports that we're having from media, is maybe what people are going.
You know, the funny thing is, when you say that this is the most corrupt man in Kenya, yet you do not have a single case of him in court being charged for any allegation or any of the things that have been mentioned against him, then you wonder what other tool do you use? This is just a cheap bar talk that people are expressing.
All right, you will tell us more about that, so that will be much later in the course of the program. But for now, as we wait for other panelists to join us, we take a keen look at the dailies, and this is what is headlining the front page of the Daily Nation today: judiciary crisis. As top judge quizzed, is what is a splash today. Suspect is accused of abuse of office and improper dealings with banks. The cream of Kenya's bench, their faces are here. Emotional drama and panic behind closed doors as police officers meet judiciary bosses, reportedly arrest city lawyer and confront judge in chambers over allegations of corruption involving the collapsed Imperial Bank. And we have also a bite here from the CJ, David Maraga, in June this year, warning judicial officers that they will carry their own crosses if proved to be corrupt. He says, quote unquote, "I have no room for corrupt judicial officers. You know that you are alone if you are corrupt, and expect no sympathy, mercy, or protection from my office." That is from the Chief Justice David Maraga. Also still on the front page of the Daily Nation, you can see there Uhuru at White House exchanging niceties there. President Uhuru Kenyatta meets American President Donald Trump at the White House in Washington, D.C. yesterday. President Kenyatta says he will use the high-profile global engagements with the United States, United Kingdom and China to drum up support for Kenya's economic agenda. Speaking from Washington, D.C. in the U.S. yesterday, the head of state said his administration will seek foreign investments from the high-level diplomatic meetings with the leaders of the three countries to fund the Big Four development projects. You have the rest of the story on page 6 of the Daily Nation today. Also, we have the Star for you, which is up next, and this is your splash today. Uhuru, inaction led to IEBC vacancy crisis. That is what we have on the front page of the Star today. Connie Maina and Margaret claimed Joseph Kinyua was aware of their return. Chebukati changes locks, refuses to meet the two, insists that they had resigned. You have the story well fleshed out for you on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. Also a standalone picture there, and with the caption reads, President Kenyatta and First Lady Margaret Kenyatta meet US President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump at the White House last night. You have this story on page 2 of the Star this morning. Also, success story, how Kibwana's style, ideas have changed Makueni. Also, light at the end of a tunnel. Karume's family runs out of cash, wants to sell 17% stake. And judiciary petitioners want 3 appellate judges out of 2017 poll. And also on Sports Saga, Piers Kabere denies loss of 1.7 billion shillings defense payment. You have this story continuing on page 3 of the Star this morning. Also, the People Daily is up next. Uhuru seals 24 billion shillings deals in US visit. This story continues on page 16 and 17 of the People Daily today. Also intrigues, return to honed electoral body. Litany of puzzles, Chebukati locks out 3 commissioners who had quit, throwing electoral body into high-stakes drama that could seal its fate like predecessors. You have the story on page 6 of the People Daily this morning. Let's take a keener look also on what we have on the front page of the Business Daily. And this is a splash today. Centum CEO takes pay cut to earn 117.5 million shillings. James Moria bonus drops by 41.7 million shillings in line with pay policy. And it says that Centum Investment Chief Executive James Moria was corporate Kenya's 4th best paid manager last year, with an annual compensation of 177.5 million shillings, or an equivalent of 14.7 million per month. The Centum annual report released yesterday shows Mr. Moria took 41.7 million shillings pay cut after getting a lower bonus check. And you can follow this story on the page 4 of the Business Daily today. Also, business deal. Here we can see President Uhuru Kenyatta, Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich, and US Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross witnessing the signing yesterday of 2 agreements between Kenya and the American business community by Kenneth Namunje of Kipeto Energy and Ray Washburn, the President and CEO of the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. That story, you can follow it inside the Daily Nation today. Not really the Daily Nation, but the Business Daily. Also, ARM, I should say, cement faces a loss of key mining licenses. Troubled cement maker ARM is facing suspension of its mining licenses in a move that could further cripple the firm's operations. The Mining Act, which came into force on May 27, 2016, lists insolvency as a condition that could trigger suspension or revocation of a mining license. You can follow this story on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Also, UAP Old Mutual lays off 89 as that is the H1 profit drops. Right, you can follow that story also on corporate news inside the Business Daily. Also, high yeast sugar already in shops, and Red Cap hurting good borrowers is another story you can follow in Money and Markets. Also, county hospitals to sell drugs at same price. County hospital will be obligated to sell government supplied drugs at the same price in new policy guidelines being developed by the Ministry of Health. You have this story continuing on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. I want to show you quickly what we do have also on the front page of Taifa Leo. But before I move on there, let me try and lift it up for you quickly so that you can see what we do have there. And this is your splash. Ziara ya Joho ya washa moto, it says. That is what we have on the front page of Taifa Leo. Baadhi ya wabunge kutoka Rift Valley wadai anashirikiana na Seneta Moi kuhujumu maandalizi ya Ruto kuelekea Ikulu. That is a story that you can follow also inside Taifa Leo today. And Rais mstaafu Daniel Arap Moi ashauriana na gavana wa Mombasa Hassan Joho na mwanawe Gideon. This is the story that you want to follow, and that is on also page This is on page 2 of Taifa Leo as well. You can follow that story. I want just to show you quickly what we have on the front page of the Standard. I have the hard copy. Chaos as Chebukati locks out poll chiefs is a splash today. And it says, entry denied. Electoral chairman insists commissioners Nkatha Maina, Margaret Mwachanya and Paul Kurgat have cleared with the commission and cannot return to work. That story continues on page 4 of the Standard today. Let's see what we have across the border. And we can begin in Tanzania, where we have the Citizen for You, 336 billion shillings award verdict against TANESCO upheld. The International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes throws out power firms, requests that the early decision be reviewed and overturned, and rules in favor of Standard Chartered Bank Hong Kong. This story continues on page 2 of the Citizen. If you're working up in Tanzania, also government threatens to revoke cement super deals or super dealers licenses. The government has threatened to cancel the licenses of cement super dealers if they fail to stamp out unwarranted price hikes by their distributors. You can follow this story on page 2 of the Citizen. Also, Mpango tells Makonda off. Mpango tells Makonda off in container saga. Minister says nobody can stop the lawful auctioning of the furniture imported in the regional commissioner's name. That story continues on page 2 of the Citizen in Tanzania. Still there, we can also take a keener look on what we have on the front page of Mwananchi. Daktari Mpango amshukia Makonda kama mwewe. That is the splash today. Ni baada ya kufanya ziara ya ghafla bandarini Dar es Salaam kukagua makontena yanayotakiwa kupigwa mnada. You can follow that story also on page 2 or page 4 of the Mwananchi in Tanzania. Also, CCM ya mjibu Mahanga ya mtaka akumbuke fadhila is another story, which is a sidebar story on the front page of the Mwananchi in Tanzania. I can show you also what TANESCO ya mriwa kuilipa Standard Chartered mabilioni, and that story continues on page 2 of the Mwananchi in Tanzania. In Rwanda, we have the New Times for you. Top 6 sources of FDIs to Rwanda in 2017 named. Europe is the leading source of foreign direct investments to Rwanda, with Portugal, United Kingdom, Germany and Spain among the leading sources, according to latest statistics from Rwanda Development Board, that is RDB. You can follow this story on page 3 of the New Times if waking up in Rwanda. Also, women urged to play a greater role in elections. This story is actually tucked away on page 5 of the New Times. And tracking the impact of foreign scholarships, that is the story that we have on page 8 of the New Times. Let's see what we have on the front page of also the magazines. We have this, the Nairobi Law Monthly. This is a story that we have here on the front page of the Nairobi Law Monthly. State capture. It says, state capture, the Ryan Republic. If you've not grabbed a copy of the Nairobi Law Monthly, that is it. Also, we have the Nairobi Business Monthly for you. Asmara Accord spells doom for Kenya is another story that you want to follow also inside the Nairobi Business Monthly this month. I shall show you also what we do have as magazines as well. This is what has been headlining the front page of the African Business Football. When will Africa cash in? That's the probing question on the front page of the African Business. If you've not grabbed a copy for yourself, make sure you do. Also, we do have the Forbes Africa. That is the ceiling crashers. Futi Mahanyele and Stacey Brewer, the disruptors in business and education, adamant about change. You can follow their story as well. This is the latest on the front page of the Forbes Africa. New Africa, we have Botswana's Masisi cometh the hour. That is what is headlining the front page. In-depth World Bank's U-turn on land reform interview. Also at collector, extraordinary. All right, that is a crack joke for me this morning. I'm still waking up. You can follow this story also inside the New African. And also we have the Newsweek bone dry India's killer's drought has claimed the lives of 59,000 farmers. With temperatures rising, that number will climb. That is what we have on the front page of the Newsweek. Also, you can follow sexual harassment at the UN. We have also compelling details of that inside the Newsweek. Fortune, the end is near. You can grab a copy. This is how it looks also. The most influential disruptors under 40 is inside the Fortune magazine. And also we have the Harvard Business Review. This is the July-August edition, when work has meaning, how to turn purpose into performance. You can follow the story on page 78. Lastly, I'll be remiss if I don't show you the editorial cartoons that we do have today. This is what we have in the Daily Nation, and this is what Munene has drawn for you. All right, President Trump there and Uhuru Kenyatta. This is, of course, he's the tweeting president, and of course, you can see what is the sandbox for him there. Is that blankety blank country's remarks and a lot of trashes underneath as well. And also we can see the Big Four agenda is what is actually taking President Uhuru Kenyatta in the US. And we have a 24 billion shillings deal that has been also cemented right now. This is what we have in the Daily Nation today, according to Munene. We have also the Star for you, and this is what has been drawn by Victor. IEBC commissioners rethink their decision to jump, but we saw what happened. Return to sender was a note from Chebukati yesterday. And also we do have the Standard for you with Gado, and this is what he's drawn. It's all about the people, of course, or Pope's visit to Ireland, and everyone was pointing accusatory finger at the Catholic Church. And this is in regard to, of course, the sexual abuse over the years. Think outside the box, Your Holiness. Right, so that is your editorial cartoon, or editorial cartoons in the dailies today. Now, let's swing for the fences as always by looking at the highlights. Uhuru's visit focuses on security and economic cooperation with the US. Two IEBC commissioners who resigned 4 months ago were back at Anniversary Towers, returned to sender, a note from Chebukati. And John McCain leaves farewell letter to Americans. The US President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump welcomed President Uhuru Kenyatta and the First Lady Margaret Kenyatta to the White House on Monday. The Trumps greeted the first family at the South Portico of the White House before meeting in the Oval Office. Now, during their visit, both leaders vowed to strengthen ties and renewed their bilateral security and economic interests.
Thank you once again, Mr. President, and welcome to the White House. Great honor. Happy to be with you. Thanks, Melania. Thank you.
To have President Kenyatta of Kenya and First Lady Kenyatta, thank you very much for being here. It's a great honor. We have tremendous relationship with Kenya. We have terrorism, a lot of trade, getting bigger and bigger all the time. We're working on a major infrastructure project, a massive roadway that will be record-setting in many ways, and we are going to conclude a lot of good things. We have the President's representatives in the next room, and we're going to be going in there, and we're going to be making some great deals for both countries. So thank you very much, both, for being here. This is a tremendous honor. Thank you.
Great pleasure. Wonderful to have us. Thank you. We appreciate it. I want to just take this opportunity to thank Mr. President and First Lady for welcoming us here to the White House. As President Trump has said, Kenya and the United States have had strong, solid relationships ever since our independence. We are here to renew that partnership. We're here to strengthen it. We've had very good and excellent cooperation, especially in our fight against terrorism because of the neighborhood that we're in. Al-Shabaab fights, which the United States have been a very strong and solid partner. But more importantly, we're here to pursue and to strengthen our trade and investment ties which are already very strong. We have a good number of American companies in Kenya, and we want to see how we can strengthen that going forward for the mutual benefit of our two countries. And I believe that we will have very fruitful discussions this afternoon, and we'll have a lot to report at the end of it. Well, thank you once again, Mr. President, for welcoming us to the White House.
Great honor.
Happy to be with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Milan. Good afternoon, and we'll.
All right, back home, Consolata Maina and Margaret Mwachanya, who resigned 4 months ago, or as IEBC commissioners, were denied access to IEBC officers I should say, as they tried to lay claim to their former positions. The two found the doors to the offices firmly shut, as IEBC chairman Wafula Chebukati made it abundantly clear that they are no longer welcome. The two commissioners were also denied access to the commission chairman.
IEBC chairman Wafula Chebukati's actions on Monday did not leave much room for interpretation. They conveyed clearly that Consolata Nkatha Maina and Margaret Mwachanya, who resigned from the commission in April, are no longer welcome back.
Our offices are still locked, so we were not able to get the office, but we are going to issue a statement much later, okay? Thank you.
And so it was that they beat a hasty retreat, Chebukati having made clear by refusing to accommodate them on his schedule that a return to the commission would be like everything else leading up to today's events. Acrimonious.
IEBC does not have offices for former commissioners. You cannot come here and say, I'm a former commissioner, give me space to work from here. They came on Friday, and we were surprised to learn that they had retained some of the keys which they had not handed over and accessed their offices, but that has now been rectified.
While Chebukati has made his position clear on the matter, it remains to be seen what the executives is. President Uhuru Kenyatta is yet to initiate the process of replacing the commissioners 4 months after they resigned, and with Maina, Mwachanya and Paul Kurgat, who they resigned alongside, presumably still receiving a pay package.
Immediately they resigned, I wrote to the Treasury, the PS, to stop their salaries. Now, I am not certain whether that was done. Up to now, I have not got a feedback on my letter, but I believe that Treasury acted on the recommendations from the Commission that they are no longer in office, and I hope they are not being paid.
Chebukati insists that the High Court ruling on the 10th of August did not allow or create room for the former commissioners to return to the IEBC.
What the judge said is that the procedure of the commissioners resigning was not clear, and I don't know whether the judge had all the information before her, because as far as the commissioners are concerned, in another case filed by activist Tom Tata, they saw affidavit saying they wrote to the president. That's all they are required to do.
Okiom Tata filed an application on Monday morning against former commissioners Nkatha, Mwachanya and Kurgat, seeking to restrain them from accessing the IEBC offices and to stop the IEBC from allowing the 3 former commissioners into their offices. Tata filed the documents to show that the 3 commissioners had indeed resigned from the IEBC and even cleared with the commission on exit. Olive Barrows, NTV.
Now, the Principal Secretary for Sports, Ambassador Kirimi Kaberia, was at pains to explain to the Parliamentary Accounts Committee how the ministry spent monies for last year's IEEF World Under-18 Championship. The ministry is on the spot after Auditor General Edward Oko raised audit queries. Kaberia was given 7 days to furnish the committee with detailed information on the spending.
Officers here that just joined us not long ago.
But you were the PS?
No, sir.
Then?
No, sir. I joined it 10 weeks to the event.
Who was the PS who was there when the process was starting and progressing?
Ambassador Kai.
I'm just worried that we are talking about sports and going to where money actually went to. There is very little sport about the people who were paid.
People that you see listed here are people that are related to the services required during the event.
We can see funny companies. Chair would like to see the names behind these companies. The PS should furnish all the names of each company here, who owns these companies?
We still had to go for NYS passes and still use GK vehicles on the same.
Parent Cabs and Parent Laundry are not the same company.
Oh, they are two different companies?
They are different companies.
But different directors or same directors?
They have different directors from what?
Is it still your testimony that paying cabs and paying dry cleaners are totally different?
May I provide that answer in writing later?
Yes, you can, yeah.
But my more fundamental question, Piers, is that you say that it is standard practice to buy phones, you know. I'm looking at the agreement we signed with the IAAF. Which provision requires you to buy phones?
Start the process of recovering all the funds that are with the public officers.
Let me help you.
Yes.
And this is now a directive of the committee, pending our report,
yes.
Okay? That you go ahead and retrieve those funds. All of them haven't actually completed the task.
Yes.
Yeah, that was before us. So we shall be inviting you at a future date.
I'm looking at my senior here and wondering, should I talk or should I just stop? We will do our best to make sure we provide everything you've asked for, and going forward we'll do everything possible to make sure we are in better condition.
Thank you very much.
Now, research firm Ipsos Innovate is ready for a legal battle. Should there be a case filed against it following publication of recent research findings on graft? Trevor Ombije spoke to Tom Wolfe, who has drawn his line in the sand, saying they're standing by the recent poll results that pointed out DP William Ruto as the most corrupt individual, closely followed by Kirinyaga Governor Uhuru. Ruto has since rubbished the poll as fake news.
Wakimaliza mambo ya fake news na opinion poll ya ukora na headline ya kulipwa, wakuje tukutane na wao katika mambo ya maendeleo ya wananchi.
We're quite used to different reactions from people in both the public and the private sector. So we try to do our work the best we can. We know that no survey is perfect, whether in the crafting of the questions or the way our respondents are selected. We have very high standards which are international, and we try to uphold them.
When you say no survey is perfect, and you mentioned that you had a sample size of about 2,000 people responding to the question that you asked, scientifically speaking, is that sufficient considering there are more than 40 million Kenyans?
Sure. From a research point of view, it would be nice if every time we did one of these surveys we could interview 10,000, because then we could do much more subsample analysis. But the cost would be prohibitive.
Can
where
you
the population
confidently
is
say
small.
that the 2,000 sample that you use is a true reflection of what Kenyans actually think?
Within the margin of error of plus or minus 2%, 2.2, we think it's a true reflection. If we get, say, 17% say this and 31% say that and so on, don't worship the numbers so precisely. There's a range of 2 or 3%. What's most important...
So it may not be a true reflection of what Kenyans
It's not an exactly 100% true, but we think it's true enough, close enough to the reality, so that we think it tells us the situation.
Who sponsored this particular poll, Tom?
Well, that's a management issue, but I can say that what we have released, because we do have certain clients who load questions, but for everything that we've released so far, this was paid for by the company.
By Ipsos itself. Yeah. So there was no external interference? No. It was not run by anybody else from outside trying to taint anybody's name in a particular way?
Now, I must say that we're happy, and I think other firms are, if a client comes, whether it's NTV or whether it's whatever political party, to do surveys for them. But my guess is, for clients of that nature, maybe not a news house, they would probably, and we know from the past, they would keep those results confidential and use them internally. For what we release to the public, unless we say openly that it was co-sponsored, they're all funded by Ipsos.
If this was funded by Ipsos, what was the thinking behind releasing it to the public then?
Well, the survey included quite a number of issues. This was the first section. And we have two categories of questions or topics. We have questions that we ask or try to ask every time. about the state of the economy, people at the household level. As I mentioned, what people consider to be the most serious problem at the locality and at the national level. The other one on Kenya's direction, how people perceive that. We try to ask about crime and victims of crime. Most times we didn't in this survey. We didn't have enough room. And some other issues we tend to track, like devolution. We used to have a couple of questions.
Of course, that will be the basis of our discussion here today on People and Politics. Our guests are already here in studio, but we want to see what is happening internationally right now. US President Donald Trump broke his silence over the passing of former US Senator John McCain, saying last evening that the Republican lawmakers' service was appreciated. John McCain, who served 6 terms in the Senate and endured torture as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, died on Saturday night. On Sunday night, Trump offered condolences to McCain family on Twitter. Earlier on Monday, at 2 separate televised events at the White House, Trump did not respond to a reporter's repeated questions about McCain.
Before going any further, I want to extend our prayers and condolences.
According to a recent poll by research firm Ipsos, the report findings rank the deputy president at 33%, followed by Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru at 31%. The Deputy President has, however, dismissed the report as cooked and part of what he calls a libelous crusade by shadowy sponsors to discredit him due to the 2022 succession. Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru says she will sue Ipsos and has accused the pollster of playing politics. Ipsos says a majority of Kenyans believe that corruption is a more serious problem facing the country today. Right, let's just hear what the leaders have to say.
Kenyans consider that corrupt people cannot be good leaders.
I have never been taken to court because of any matter regarding corruption. So you cannot come and say I am the most corrupt.
About constant, perennial, unending headlines about William Ruto this, William Ruto that, opinion poll this, corruption the other, is sponsored by our competitors because they cannot match our development record.
Sasa nimechoka maneno ya kushindanga hapa kila siku kuambiwa ati oh most corrupt, most corrupt.
My friends, William Ruto has never ever been involved in any form of corruption, either as Member of Parliament or today serving as Deputy President. And I give my pledge that I will not.
We are the most corrupt country on the continent. We are now fighting with the Super League of corruption. With the countries like Nigeria, like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nicaragua, some of the most corrupt countries. That is where Kenya is in Super League of corruption.
Head over now to Twitter handle AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle, AM Live NTV, your profile name on Facebook, and 20686 our SMS portal. We want to introduce our panelists one more time. We did that at the top of the hour when we had Aaron Cheriot in the studio, but right now we have Boni Khalwale. Dr. Boni Khalwale is the Deputy Chair of Ford Kenya and also the former Senator of Kakamega. Also, we do have with us Dr. Otiende Amolo, who is a Member of Parliament from Rarieda. We do have with us as well Jacob Dio, who is the former minority leader in the National Assembly and of course also former Member of Parliament of Game, and Kimani Matangi, who is a senator for Kiambu. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Debarl.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And of course, we want just to focus on this particular report on corruption. Of course, we saw earlier where my colleague Trevor Mbija was questioning, the researcher from Ipsos, that is Tom Wolf, regarding this particular report. And we've had Ruto claiming that some of his, or some of the journalists, or some of his pollsters are actually sponsored. And they're a bit cagey with the information there. Let's just begin with you, Aaron Cheriot. Of course, you gave a snippet of this at the top of the hour. But now listening to all this that we have from our leaders, what is your sentiment?
Well, like I had said earlier, Debarl, this is a very interesting opinion poll. It is interesting because in other opinion polls, what people are supposed to respond to are facts and things that they are sure of their mind. For example, you'd be asked, who are you voting for? To be Senator of Kakamega, to be your MP in Rarieda, and that kind of poll. When you give an answer, you're sure that that is the exact answer and that is what you're going to do. When you're given another opinion poll and asked, what is it that frustrates you more about your country? People have seen that opinion poll, people responding and say the cost of living, the corruption scandals that we keep on hearing about. That's an empirical research that somebody can respond to based on facts and not any other information. This kind of opinion poll, however, in my opinion, how do you sample bar talk? Because this is essentially what it is. How do you measure perception about corruption? I was just speaking to my colleague here, Jacoy, a few minutes ago, and I told him sometimes you can't limit what people think about you as a politician, especially if you have opponents who continue to throw mud at you and, insinuate certain things about you. Leave alone the fact that you may never have been confirmed to be true or not true. That tag may tend to stick. While at that, it is important to note that when you're fighting to break into the great league, you know, of the kind of politics that the deputy president plays in, this is not unusual. It is important to note, for example, that I remember for Raila Odinga, before 2007 February, Raila Odinga had never scored beyond 3% in a presidential opinion poll. The perception that had been created about him was that he was not presidential material, and he had to stick with that tag for quite a long time. It gets to a point where people realize that this is absolute hogwash, he's presidential material, and therefore, by December of that year, people went on to vote for him in a poll that I strongly believe he won, you know, and therefore, I do not see anything strange about this particular poll. This is a tag that political detractors have tried to attach to the conduct and the persona of the deputy president. And I think over time, people will realize that it is not what it is. This is just a facade. When the real debate and the contest, because I can see that clearly this is about political distraction. When people, when the rubber meets the road and political competition begins, this kind of nonsense will not have a place.
So when you talk about empirical, what do you exactly mean?
The fact that when you're answering, you're sure of what you're saying. But when I ask you, is Debarl corrupt, yes or no? The simple answer will be yes, if I have ever seen you tried in a court of law, or no, if you have never. But the fact that you're measuring something called perception, that by looking at you, looking at your tie, I can say this tie is too expensive for a journalist like Debarl. Therefore, the only way he got it is if he stole. Right. Surely, how is that helpful to us?
Because when you say empirical, of course, that is based on or concerned by observation,
yes,
and experience.
Yes.
And not logic and pure theory, isn't it?
No, no, no. It includes observation, experience, logic. You know, you deduce something based on what has been tested. For example, if you want to know who is corrupt, list and say these are the people that have been tried in court and have been successfully found to be corrupt. But when you run a perception index, you know, I've just told, anyway, let me wait.
Okay. Let's say from Boni Khalwale, your reaction when you heard about this or when you read about this particular story?
I think it is difficult to dismiss this poll because we were not party of the research. However, there are pertinent questions to ask. If it was intended to be propaganda meant to embarrass Anne Waiguru and the deputy president, it succeeded. But if it was intended to help destroy their prospects of whatever they will run for in 2022, then only time will tell. I will therefore limit my comments to the technical aspect.
Which are what?
Namely, Tom Wolf knows that the Public Opinion Polling Act, which was my brainchild, demands that before he released that particular survey, he should have told Kenyans who commissioned him, how much he was paid for, who were the interviewees, and what was the question. Let me go to the issue of the question. You can get that result by asking 3 different questions, and depending on that question, you get different answers. I mean, different results. You could ask, for example, who do you think is the most corrupt person in Kenya? Or you could ask, which one of the following you list? Which one of the following is the most corrupt person in Kenya? Or you could ask, you ask the interviewee, list the top corrupt Kenyans on this page. You would get totally different results. So Tom Wolf should have actually done Kenyans that favor. The history of Tom Wolf, unfortunately, is that he has been used over the years to churn out data that has always pushed the ODM agenda. He did this effectively in 2007 to the extent that there are many Kenyans who believe that those opinion polls contributed to the post-election violence of 07 and 08.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, of course, we'll try and reach Tom Wolf because he's not here to defend himself, so we cannot really verify what you're saying this morning, but we'll try and access him this morning so that he can actually, you can put that question to him as well. Let's hear from Dr. Otiende.
Thank you, and good morning, Kenya. It is interesting listening to Senator Cheriot and my brother, Dr. Halwale. You know, they say that people see the light. But then those who lose the light, I don't know what exactly they say of them. I have said this lately, that my brother Dr. Luale's views lately, let's just say they correlate very closely with Senator Cheriot's on many of these matters, which is democratic and which is completely okay. But they're completely wrong. Perception and convictions are two different things. People, if you want a conviction, you go to court. If you want perception, you go to the streets, you go to the villages, you go to the beaches. And those who do opinion polls and opinion surveys have never pretended that they're anything other than that. The whole idea even of ranking of countries is not based on conviction. When we say Kenya is one of the most corrupt countries, where has Kenya been convicted? It is because of the perceptions of those who interact with us, internally and externally. When I was at ICJ as chair, we started what we call the Corruption Perception Index. And that index would ask you, what is your view of corruption in the police force, in the judiciary, in all those? None of those units were ever convicted. So to say that no one has been convicted and therefore that perception survey is wrong is itself wrong. Secondly, I'm surprised about what Dr. Halwale has just said, because historically, if you go back 1 year now, and even further, if there is one survey team that has been attacked, and we in ODM and the larger NASA attacked it severally, it is Tom Wolf and Ipsos. Because we believed then, and I would still believe now, that the surveys were tailor-made to favor what is the Jubilee administration right now, and that was even before elections. So it is not true that Ipsos has always favored ODM. In fact, it is the converse completely. So what is interesting now is that when we had this discussion with my brother Senator Cheriot a year ago, he believed that Ipsos was the best thing that ever happened to this country. But now he says that he has just realized that Ipsos is the worst thing. You know, these realizations, which lately have been coming to my brother Senator Cheriot lately, are very interesting. But let's just say that there must be some consistency in terms of what you say. I agree, and we said it then, and I say now, that any team that does survey owes it to all of us to explain exactly how they did it. And if there's a question as to whether it was done of their own volition or it was sponsored, they also owe it to explain. But having said that, I would completely understand why many Kenyans would think, why the deputy president's name would come quite close, why Governor Anne Waiguru's name would come, because there is no single day that you go through any of these papers where NYS is not mentioned somewhere. In fact, they've now given it seasons, season 1, season 2. There is nothing more vivid in the memory of Kenyans than that lady, what was her name? The one who carried money Kavura, who by her own admission in an affidavit says she carried money in sacks to the benefit of somebody. You know, there's the very week that this survey appears to have been released is a very week where in each of the papers there was 3 different mentions of the deputy president, whether real or not. There was a mention of Westgate in terms of whether it's on riparian, land, airport land. Weston, sorry. There was mention of the Airgate Mall,
yes.
In terms of whether it's on a road reserve. There was mention of the alleged Dolphin Hotels in Mombasa, whether it has encroached on... so anybody who is focusing not on the reality of conviction, but on the perception, naturally would go there. But lastly, on this one, I've heard the Deputy President say that these polls are paid for. And I wonder who would have paid for this one. I wonder who is daring to meet, you know, in terms of investments out there and not in terms of perception. Because I think it behoves of him and even the governor, Uhuru, yes, to bring forth those who they are saying are the ones who are, you know, manipulating this, so that we would know if there's anybody else we are dealing with. But the reality is, they say that where there's smoke, there's fire.
Where there's smoke, there's fire. Let's hear from Jacob Medio, and maybe we can actually also look at what Dr. Otende is mentioning about that particular headline that we had on the front page of the Star, which is Ruto built Weston on aviation land. Facts are stubborn. First of all, is Weston, you know, where it is right now on a public land? That will be the question. Then we can determine whether this perception are true or not. First, we can begin there. If we've been demolishing other malls like South End Mall and other, you know, UK, Nakumatt UK, they've gone down. If Weston Hotel is actually on a public property or public land, why is it not coming down?
That is for sure, Debarl, because that used to be the warehouse for DCA. I know I have a couple
KCA.
DCA. DCA.
Directorate of Civil Aviation.
Yes.
All right. Before it moved to KCA.
Yeah, and I rarely have very kind words of I mean on William, but I think it should not be demolished. I think it needs to go back to the government. We have issues with his activities. You know, in the current budget, William Ruto is about to be paid 3 billion shillings on houses he built when Kanu was leaving power. In Jogo Road, supposedly for occupation of the policemen. And I think it would be wrong to pay him that money. Because number one, the land is public land. Number two, I think the government must not be on demolition spree. I think all those properties built, especially by the Chinese in Kileleshwa and all those in Lavington, need to go back to the government for civil servants. We need to offer those houses to civil servants. And that's where Kidero comes in. That's where Kidero comes in, because the bylaws, city bylaws say that you cannot build beyond 4 floors in those areas. Now that they have built 15 floors, the Kideros and the Wanainas, those need to come back to government for occupation by our civil servants. We need to thank them for having thought that if they were going to get away with it, grab all of them back so that we don't demolish. What we need to demolish is things on riparian land. We need to demolish things on road reserves, then the ones on riparian lands. The rest of it, take it back as a government, give it to your workers, who are the civil servants. Okay. In fact, I believe if you offered Debarl for you and me for about 2 million bob, a house in Lavington, I think it would be fair to a civil servant. Because I don't think civil servants should live in Eastlands.
Thank you.
And the rest of us should live in...
All right, let's hear from Kimani Mwatangi before I take a short break.
Thank you, Debarl. And let me say good morning to our viewers. Debarl, let me start by, although far away in the United States, sending my message of condolence to a hero, the family of a hero that I have admired greatly, the late Senator John McCain. You know, he's a man that I studied, you know, for a while, because I admired his career, a chartered career in my view. I mean, having served his country as a fighter, and again coming to serve for the years he has served as a legislator in the Senate, and I being a senator too, he's a man I drew a lot of inspiration from. Yes. And I want to say that I've lost in my retinue of heroes, a great hero, somebody that I would have always wanted to be like in service of country. Now, having said that, and then on this question that you asked about opinion polls, Debarl, just the other day, remember, we passed, and probably this is the, I would call it the dichotomy that we need to look at. Remember, we passed a law, and which was assigned to by the president the other day on regulation of content on social media, and the reason and the inspiration as to why that law was mooted and why it was signed actually, and of course supported, was for purposes of control against opinions expressed in social media that are largely erroneous and that deny the person targeted the right of either fair reply or at least of fair representation in that debate or in that discussion. And you know, what would come to mind is if the country would be in agreement that there exists a need now to accent to a law then that would be saying that when you post content about Debarl on social media, let it be content that is moderated by fair sense of responsibility and truth. And then you would be asking yourself, then is there some semblance, either distance or not, with the effect and running of opinion polls? Because this cuts across the board. You know, it doesn't have to be really the subject of the two individuals that you talked about, but in general application. Because one would be asking yourselves, if I was to run an opinion poll as a firm like Ipsos, and I'm running it against you know, probably an opinion Debarl on maybe Boni Halwale there. What guarantees are there? What content and how am I represented that at the end of the day the poll that you're going to run is not going to be either hijacked? And I say this for two reasons. For example,
could we take a short break then? Don't lose your track of thought right now, because yeah, when we come back, when we circle back, we'll continue with you.
Absolutely.
Right, we want to take a short break right now, but what do you reckon, right? What is your contribution as well on this particular debate that we're having this morning? Right, hit us on Twitter. AMLiveNTV is a Twitter handle. AMLiveNTV, our profile name on Facebook, and 20686 is our SMS portal. Do you agree with the Ipsos Synovet recent polls putting a deputy president as the most corrupt man in the country, doggedly also followed by Uhuru? Right, let's hear from you this morning. Don't go away.
If you go to Kakamega, for example,
Welcome back. You're watching People and Politics here on AM Live. We continue with the conversation. We're looking at, of course, the recent polls by Ipsos, who put Deputy President William Ruto as the highest or the most corrupt person in the country, followed by Anne Waiguru. Before we took a short break, we had Kimani Omatangi just also processing his thought about this particular poll. Kimani, I hope you've not really lost your track of thought. Why are you laughing?
Because you had persuaded me not to lose my track of thought. Since then, you know, there has been a lot of. You should have, on the same breath, told Jacoyo to keep quiet. But anyway, Debarl, the approach I was giving this was mirroring it against what we have in the provisions of, for example, you know, freedom of expression, and I believe that was part of the motivation that inspired the sponsorship of the bill that I was just the law that I was just referring to, that regulated content and the freedom one has when you are posting an opinion against either an individual or people in social media, that you're supposed to carry a certain sense of responsibility. And the reason why I was looking at it that way is then to ask if then that we were feeling that what was happening progressively in social media was eating way far into the rights and freedom of individuals in terms of expression, then one would want to be asking, you know, for purposes of thought, is this, you know, would there be need now probably to relook at that act that was sponsored by Boni Halwale on the content and the running of opinion polls in this country, such that it would have an element of law that also not necessarily protects, but gives at least, you know, some leverage to the person or people being looked at. And you know, the reason I also say this, Debarl, is, see, at the end of the day, we have agreed that that poll is run on what the perception is, not necessarily what the reality is. And you know, I mean, of course, because it is arguable that perception is not reality. Then the person who is indicted or convicted of that report, whichever word you would want to use in that case, would be arguing, if you think that I'm the most corrupt, why don't you take me to court with the real issues? And probably that would be the way to go. Lastly, Debarl, I want to say that yes, although it is perception, I believe if you ask, did that or does that do damage to an individual, for example, who is poised, who is running, you know, for office, the simple and true answer is yes, it does. And hence the reason why there would need either to be moderation or inclusion. So lastly, I believe that the best way for any person mentioned is to then ultimately fight that perception, because it can continue to be used against one.
All right, so it's all about perception, and of course you've mentioned how media has been on this front, and I want us just to look at this issue of Western Hotel itself first of all, and then we can look at the mechanics of how the views the Ipsos have, because I know at the end of the day polls is all about perception, isn't it? That's why we carry out polls. Yeah. I mean, we had the US, they had the polls. So much was actually, you know, estimated that Hillary Clinton will take the day. But that was diametrically different even from what the polls were giving with the outcome. Can we come back to you, let's hear from you, Senator Cheriot. Looking at this particular headline on the Star again, if we may put it back again, what would be your reaction to this? Because, yes, it's an established fact that this Western Hotel, this particular land was a Kenya Civil Aviation land. Before just a moment, if there were any exchanges, did we have any gazette notice that was put forth or any notice that was put in the dailies to notify the public that this land has gone through different, of course, hands, it has been exchanged, and there is a public notice? Do you, in any, if maybe you can actually jog back your memory on this, do you remember any public notice that was put there for the public to know that, yes, Western Hotel has been, or KCA land has been given to Western Hotel?
Before I speak about Weston, there's something that Tiende Omolo said earlier on that I believe will be wrong if it goes unchallenged, because while he's entitled to his opinion, he shouldn't be entitled to his own facts. You know, while speaking to the issue of opinion poll, he said that they're just a perception. I want to remind him that Transparency International, one of the few reputable firms globally that carry out this kind of perception surveys, if he goes and does a more detailed reading on how they carry perception surveys, because that is what he wants to speak out to, he will realize that what they eventually see as that score that they give to Kenya and these other countries is an amalgamation of various surveys conducted by other independent bodies. Then they sit down and study those surveys independently and agree on one final answer. Where you will be asked different questions, you'll find an organization that purely went out and asked people, have you ever paid a bribe? And different people will give you a yes or a no answer. Then they'll carry out another survey of public officials and say, have you ever paid a bribe in the course of carrying out your duties? And finally, when they retreat and they want to come up with a final ranking, it will be a study of various opinion polls carried out by different institutions, and you now collapse it into one informed public opinion survey. That is the kind of information that Bonnie and Wale was speaking about earlier when he said that we want to know who commissioned this survey and how they arrived at this particular process. Therefore, he cannot dash away from facts and say that perception is perception. There is still a process that leads you to arrive at a credible perception process.
Thank you.
Speaking about this particular issue, you know, I want to plead with my good friends Jakoyo and Otiende that you're fairly good gentlemen. Do not sacrifice good values for politics. Good values in the extent that if you want us to have a credible discussion about public land that is now under contested ownership in Kenya, it will form a good discussion. But when you zero in on establishments that are owned by one particular individual, then people will ask why this obsession by whatever is owned by William Ruto alone. It's purely politics, and it is good politics for them because, and that is how we have never succeeded in winning this war on corruption. A more credible way of looking at it would be to question, for example, the whole of Upper Hill used to be Kenya Railways land. There are hotels that are built there. I
just want to go.
Therefore, in a manner of public petition, what good brains like Otiende should be doing is questioning what is the process that led to former government land or contested. For that sake, if there is a contest, KCAA still believes that they own the land, and any other Kenya Railways and other public entities that they feel that they lost land unfairly to private individuals,
right.
We should have a holistic look at the view. But the minute you zero in on certain establishments and you do not want to have a discussion about it, you do not want to question and say...
All right, thank you. Because I think we are losing the conversation into the woods. In the woods right now. I want us just to verify, because I've asked you a very pointed question. Just a moment.
Do you know why you're losing? Do you know why you're losing the conversation?
Just a moment. Because I want us to be very pragmatic with this. We are basing this discussion not on an individual, but on a poll that has given out its results, putting out Deputy President as the most corrupt person in the country. So it is not we have singled out him, but we want to, you say, all this is perception. But we have a case in point. This is where we want to dig deeper. Can we just begin from here so that we can truly establish?
How difficult is it, Debarl,
yes,
to follow my
no, because now you're taking me in circles. I've asked you a very pointed question. Is this, did you have any verifiable fact about the exchange of this land from KCA to William Ruto? Did you? Was there any public notice in the first place?
Why will this,
or we are not? Can you tell us?
Why will it be of interest to me? It is not my duty to keep track of anyone's wealth. I do not know what Otiende owns. I do not know what any other politician owns. It is not in my duty. But the question that I tell you, as a credible media house, what you should be doing, and why we find polls like the one conducted by Tom Wolf to be purely political and do not help the cause of making this country a better place, is instead of having such headlines as the one that are in the Star, the discussion that we should be having is,
Are there private properties that are in land that we consider to be public, or contested public land where the public institutions continue to lay claim of ownership? Right. Then let's have a discussion about it and say how many.
Just a moment.
List them.
Wouldn't that be very hypothetical if we have facts?
It isn't, unless.
Why should we be saying it is there and we have verifiable facts?
Is it the only one? Is it the only one?
We are basing it on the discussion.
No, my question to you, Debarl, will be, is it the only one?
It's not the only one, but
yes,
we begin from here.
That's why I'm telling you, let us have a whole holistic debate about it and say how much of public land is in private hands in Kenya.
Let's hear from
and have a better discussion about this.
Thank you.
Otherwise, we will reduce this into politics about the people who love William Ruto and those who hate him. And we lose the point. That's not what this show is about.
It is not about William Ruto. It is about the Ipsos Innovate. And of course, this is a perception which is out there. So if at all then the perception is not true, it's only fair for them to really come forward and verify these perceptions are not true. Let's hear from Boni Khalwale, because he says that also the media has, this particular Ipsos Innovate has been sponsored. It is also fair for the Deputy President to tell us who has sponsored Ipsos, isn't it?
I think the question you have raised now is the ownership of the land on which Western Hotel is built. I want to fold the Nation Media House.
To fault?
To fault you.
Yes.
Fault. Because I think in a few, was it 3 weeks ago? 4 weeks ago, you hosted the Deputy President on a live program. That was a huge opportunity for you to ask him to explain how land which we all Kenyans know was belonging to Aviation Authority, how it ended up being his own property. You lost that chance. So let's leave it there. Now, let me speak to the issue of land. Land is such an emotive issue that it is the reason why in 2005, when we went to the referendum, it was very difficult for that referendum to go through. It is so emotive that it has destroyed the management of land in Zimbabwe, has destroyed the economy of a great country that we used to learn was called Rhodesia. Today, we have a beautiful constitution which is very clear on who owns land in Kenya. According to the law of this country, the mother law, the constitution, all land in Kenya belongs to the people of Kenya. Only that you either are an owner of this land in Kenya collectively, which they call public land, or you are an owner by dint of the community you come from, which they call community land, or you are a private owner. The beauty with this classification is that Kenyans must know that there is a process of land moving from one class to another. Private land can become public land can become private land, and so on. So if a piece of land which we know was public, on which Western is built, the conversation in this room now should not be anything other than trying to find out why and how did public land end up to be private land.
Yes.
If in that conversation we establish that the due process was used, then for God's sake, you wouldn't be talking about knocking down the hotel. But if the due process was not used, then we would all be saying, let's knock the land down. And this issue of knocking buildings down, I think Medio has brought it out. Let Kenyans know that the pieces of land, which the buildings that are being knocked down now, to my understanding, are either on riparian land or on road reserves. And that's why people want the Taj Mahal to go and other buildings that are on riparian land. Is Western Hotel on riparian land?
Or on a road reserve?
Is it on a road reserve? So since it is not one of those, please go and establish whether the due process of converting what was public land into private land was followed. Let me tell you, I am old enough in this country. When I was a young boy at the University of Nairobi, much of the land you see private property built on in Nairobi was public land. Who doesn't know that the entire Upper Hill used to be little houses of civil servants of the Republic of Kenya? Yeah. But now they are private property. So if we just go like that, it means you go and knock out all the high-rise buildings in Upper Hills because of that emotive way of looking at it. I appeal that we use the due process and nothing else, the law.
All right, let's say from Otenemolo.
You know, Chinua Achebe says in his book that old women will always be jittery when rattling bones are mentioned. That's where my brother, Senator Cheruiyot, is. And that's why he could not answer to your question. Because this is something he cannot possibly answer. And you know, in law, we say that if, for example, you are accused of theft, you do not come to court and say, I am not the only thief. There are also others out there. If you do that, you will go to jail, those others will not. Because you cannot confess on behalf of another. You must just deal with yours. So to say, in answer to a very specific question, that it is not the only public land that was taken, is first to admit that it is public land, and therefore we must deal with you before we find those others. Let us start with the question of surveys. And, you know, fortunately, my brother, Senator Cheruiyot here, I did the perception surveys for ICJ for 10 years. And lately, at the Office of the Ombudsman, we also we commissioned, and every year we are doing perceptions in terms of all the government institutions. So I can assure you that it's an area I know quite well. But let's not digress. Let's focus on Weston. And let us start with where Dr. Halwele has left. Indeed, we must use the law. Yeah. The law to use here is Article 40, Sub-Article 5 of the Constitution. Article 40 focuses on protecting land and property. But it is very clear that the protections extended by this Constitution does not extend to land that was unlawfully acquired. What is the situation in Western? First, I think we spent a couple of weeks debating, is the Deputy President associated with Western or not? Does he own it or not? And I think we can safely say that in the fullness of time, he came to accept that he does. That's number one. Number two, is it land that was lawfully acquired? We have it on the authority of Captain Kibe, who is the CEO of Kenya Civil Aviation Authority right now. And that's the caption you put there. That at no time did the KCAA ever resolve to release that land to anyone. And in his, in his statement, he says that they have always been struggling all these years to recover that land. Indeed, he says that it is part of the failures of the National Land Commission that they've never resolved that. So we also have it therefore an authority of the only body that could have resolved to release. And that is where that land then differs from a lot of these others. In many of these other instances, the public bodies themselves, by some unlawful process, resolved to release that land. In this one, by their own statement, they never did. So it's not a burden of showing that it was not unlawfully acquired. It is a burden of showing how it was acquired, because the only body that could release it says we never did. Thirdly, it should be remembered that not long ago, there was the attempt to annex the neighboring field of Langata Primary.
Yes.
And at that occasion, as Ombudsman, I also did the investigation, and we came up with a very scathing report. Because the same process that appeared to have been used to get the KCAA land at the time is the same process they tried to use, except that now the public was more alive and the investigation on it was more robust, and therefore they backed up. So, is it land that we should focus on? Of course, Dr. Boni Holwele, we must. We are not only focusing on riparian land. We are not only focusing on road reserves. We must focus on all public land that is either being acquired unlawfully or has been acquired unlawfully. And to that, I would not only be focusing on Western. I think if the National Land Commission did the work that we had intended that they do, I can assure you by now, we would have recovered a lot of public land. Actually, it's a shame that it appears to be the office of the DPP and DCI that are now taking over the work of recovering public land that was unlawfully acquired. That should be the work of the National Land Commission. By now, they should have pronounced themselves on so many of these instances that we should have recalled them back. Where I disagree with my brother Jakoyo is that if the building is unlawfully put up, then in my view, it is what we call void ab initio. It is wrong in law. It's like the debate we've been having, you know, when people, you know, poach elephants and take the ivory, and you know how expensive it is. Do we ban it or do we sell it? We have chosen to sell it because we want to send a message that never go to get it. And therefore, for me, once it is established that it was unlawfully acquired, it must be gotten back. If it's on riparian land, it's on all those things, it must be demolished. And those who developed them must look for either those who sold it to them or those who made the approvals to pay them back. I think that we must be very focused on this. And I agree with those Kenyans who've been asking that why are we only seeing demolitions in certain areas and why do some buildings appear to be protected? If we want to demonstrate that impunity must fall, then there cannot be any sacred cows. If anything is on riparian land, if anything is on a road reserve, if land is such that it is established, it was public land, unlawfully acquired, it must revert without exception.
Let's hear from Jakoyo Medio.
Yeah, I think Otiende is spot on, but I want to disagree with him a bit on the issue of demolitions. You know, demolitions must not be reckless. I am one of those people who say Western Hotel must not be brought down. Must not be brought down. And the ownership must go back to the government. So are many, you know, there are many Kenyans who are politicians who acquired a lot of property in Lavington area. Lavington, Kileleshwa, Kilimani area. Those need to go back to Kenyan civil servants. And I can tell you for free that the notion that that it is poor to be a civil servant is a wrong notion. Let us give it to ordinary Kenyans, kick out the Chinese builders, and make sure that there is affordable housing in our country. Those are not housing on riparian land or on road reserve, or, you know, they're just stolen houses. Coming back to Western, I thought, Debarl, about 10 days ago, I thought William Ruto lost an opportunity of a good politician. He should have carried back to the government the title of Western Hotel, because it is an illegal title. Should have carried back, or, you know, the fenced place next to NHIF, NSSF. Should have carried all those titles and said, because I went to church and I saw him in church in Karen, and said that we are not going to leave no stone unturned. I thought Bill would have carried all those titles, this ones of Kenya Science and all those things. He should have said in public that I give back the titles because we are in a new era. I thought it would have really, if he had done that a week or so ago, if the people were to vote today, I would have given him my vote, because I thought, that is an issue of integrity. Western Hotel, the mere fact that Uncle Bill had said it belongs to him, and that the school next to it belongs to government. I thought, when you just show up as a man, just do it. And I hope he's watching. I hope he's watching. I'm talking as somebody who can be sued and can sue, because I know for a fact that Kenya is messy. I know for a fact that people who have messed up Kenya, William Ruto is one of them. And I know for a fact that at his age, because I know I'm older than him, he has a chance to redeem himself. He can redeem himself. Just give back what is not yours. This guy says he was a chicken farmer. Go back to Rudi kwa kuku. Rudi kwa kuku. But give us back what belongs to us. And don't look at us with a straight face and tell us you are not corrupt. Because what you have just played, he's saying he's not corrupt, he's corrupt. Because I know he is corrupt. I followed the Mays case, I followed all these things. Now, lastly, Tom Wolf that we are now trying to kill in the media. He interviewed 2,500 Kenyans. Even if you go to Koma Market, those people are not 2,500. They all said William Ruto in their own thinking, perception. So, Debarl, you cannot be crucified for that. We cannot crucify Tom Wolf. 2,500 Kenyans said that the biggest thief they know in this country is one William Samoei Ruto. In fact, they were much more clearer than I've just said it.
Thank you. Let's hear from Kimani Matangi.
Debarl, at one point
I could see you concealing some laughter. I don't know what's really tickling you.
Because I was wondering, I was listening to Jacoya, sometimes he goes left, sometimes he goes right. And at one point I was asking myself, when did William Ruto become his uncle? Because I'm hearing him referring to Uncle Bill. So I'm wondering, Debarl, I've got two views about this, and I think I can express them in a short time. One, Debarl, I take a slightly different view. I'll give my reasons. One, the late Kenneth Matiba is one of the few successful politicians who ran enterprise and non-enterprise, including being a hotelier, and from having risen from an obscure background. And we associate him with the hotels in Mombasa, Jardini and all that, his chain of hotels. Now remember the late Michuki. Same thing if you go to hotels like Windsor, they associate them with Michuki. And there was no either seemingly trying to hide behind the curtain that it was Michuki who was running those hotels. I mean, today in the papers, you see you're running a big story here about Jenga Karume's enterprise. And Jenga Karume actually is on record as having written a book himself, from, I think, a Chaco dealer to whatever, and there's a famous book, actually, I have it in my library, I'll be reading it soon. And he talks of a chartered career where he rose, one, as a politician, and two, as an entrepreneur. And and even currently serving politicians, Debarl, even like Raila Amolo Odinga, if you ask people, they will associate him with Spectre East Africa. And he's still a practicing politician. And so I would take this different view. I would not agree. I don't see why. Why, even if I was I was speaking to this from whichever point of view. Why would anyone want to be defending William Ruto to the extent that it is as though he doesn't have a right to succeed in either as an entrepreneur in owning property, or as if he must explain something because he got to a certain point in life? I do not think that that would sell to anyone, because Debarl, let's put it plainly, that like everybody else, and I can say it on record myself, from when I was a young man, actually I started hearing about William Ruto. He's running an insurance company, and I would admire, I would hear, oh, he's running this company. And so even himself, I would say to him this morning, if somebody wants you to explain that you have succeeded as an entrepreneur besides being a politician, you must rise to the occasion and say so. You have no reason to give excuses for succeeding as an entrepreneur. And so let it be not cast on anyone that you have to carry any guilt because you are associated that you did this or they did that. But now the departure point is this, on where you are talking about, or where the debate now goes to the legality of what he owns. And I think this has been put very clearly. You see, when it comes to land ownership or property ownership, we have property and land that is owned under title deeds, which you have legally acquired yourself and purchased. We have got land that you can enterprise on and even develop, having leases on. You can develop land and entrepreneur on it, having TOLs, what are called temporary occupation licenses. Yes. And you see, what you just need to find out when one is on a certain either piece of land, having put a certain development, is how do you occupy it? And if it is either of all the three, if one has a title, if they don't have the title, they could have a lease. If they don't have a lease, they could have a TOL. If they don't have a TOL, then what you do, even in that event, what you would be saying to those people is you owe it to regularize this position. I mean, if you have not followed due procedure, follow it, regularize. If it is payment, pay. Then if ultimately it has to be surrender, then surrender it. But I believe that this debate, and as far as especially William Ruto is concerned, it has to move from some guilt that is imposed on him. I'm an entrepreneur myself. I've risen from a very poor background. I mean, if Debarl 30 years ago I showed you where I came from, you would not believe that this is the Matangi who is sitting here. I mean, I wore shoes the first day when I went to high school. I mean, that's how I grew up. I wore a kinyasa until the day when I went to high school with my first pair of trousers. And so you see, having entrepreneured, done what I've done, and prayed and worked and clawed my way to where I am, you know, I would feel terrible to have to justify that I wake up every day at 3 a.m. and plan and work and sacrifice and save. And then one day you want to put me in a spot whereby I must explain painfully that I have to feel guilty for having done what I've done. So what I'm saying is that I believe for everything that he has done right, he has a right to be where he is. But for everything that is wrong, and that's why I'm referring then to the perception, then even himself has a right, has an obligation to regularize it or to surrender it. But I believe most of those issues would be because questions have not been asked to him. I mean, ask him, like Bonnie had already said, this land, do you have a TOL? Do you have a lease? Do you have a title? You know, what arrangement do you have? You know, and then you have the answers. But otherwise, you know, the blanket condemnation is probably what doesn't give the correct picture. As a country, I think we have to be a country whereby we are leading from the front and being in the forefront. You know, that's why I said, listen, Jacoyo, and this is my closing on that as the answer to Jacoyo. You know, if you have a title deed, then it is your obligation to explain how did you acquire the title deed. Yeah, it's that simple. You know, and so what I'm saying is, if you sit here and condemn somebody blanketly for having seemingly, in your perception, succeeded beyond what he should have succeeded to.
Let's take from Chariot briefly, then we'll come to Boni Khalwale on this.
You know, Debarl, I've listened to Jacoyo Midiwo this morning. And if it was not in the morning, if maybe this show was hosted in the evening, I'd have thought maybe what he was speaking to was not a product of anything that is not water. but because it is morning, I want to believe that whatever he may have had last evening has cleared out of his blood. Therefore, he is sober and he is aware of what he is speaking. You know, last parliament, this man that is seated here, the Honorable Jakoyo Midiu, then as a deputy minority whip, deputy minority leader, sorry, tried to set up a committee, a special select committee of parliament to investigate the enterprise that is a sport pesa and whether they were fleecing money. You should look for the Hansard of Parliament on that afternoon on what his colleagues in Parliament said about him inside and outside the precincts of Parliament. That motion was shut down because the same Jakoyo that is pontificating here this morning, his colleagues believed that he was part of the racket that were extorting money from enterprises and businesses and threatening them that if you come before Parliament, you will face us. I do not have any reason to believe whether that is true or false. But I just want to tell him that whatever people say about us out there can be true or not true. And therefore, as you speak as if you're the Pope from Game, the cleanest man alive, just remember that whatever you're speaking about others, other people speak about you as well. And therefore, we owe it to the people that watch us on shows like this to be guarded in our words, to try and push logic and not bad in shows like this. Coming back to this particular debate that we've had this morning, my good friend Otiende says that in my previous argument, whatever he deciphers out is that I'm saying Western is built on public land, but it is not the only property that is built on public land, and therefore we should have a holistic debate. Nothing will be further from the truth, and therefore I want to use as simple English as possible so that my good friend does not misinterpret my point of argument and what I'm trying to say, because it's absolutely not different from what Boni Halwala is saying. My point of debate and question is, they say the truest test of leadership is its refusal to be compromised. On this one, my good friend, you're being compromised in your thoughts, because if you want to have a discussion on, say, one particular enterprise, yet I'm leading you and saying, let us have a more serious debate about this issue on what is contested private land in Kenya that we feel was lost by the public, and what are institutions that are public institutions that continue to lay claim on a number of public properties. Let's have that discussion and say, if we want to for sure win this war, that should be our debate. But the minute we laze it with politics, as you want to do this morning, we will lose the entire debate.
All right. So would you also claim what we heard from the chair of the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority regarding this particular land? What he said, just to quote him, that all I can tell you is that we are trying.
Yes.
Our best to repossess our land.
Yes.
We are in court with several cases, and the rest is with the National Lands Commission.
I support him 100%.
No, listen. Then he said, yes, Western Hotel is part of the land, but the case is with NLC. Kibe, of course, told a certain, of course, publication.
Yes.
Yeah. So we can see, of course, the land itself, it's in controversy. We don't have, you say we have a title deal on it. We wonder how did they get that title deal if now they've gone back to,
in fact, it is better that General Kibe has said precisely what I am saying this morning, but you have refused to listen to me.
No,
because you believe I should be giving you a certain answer, which unfortunately I'm not giving you.
I'm not.
I have said
all the time, yes.
I have said all contested private land, like what General Kibe is contesting, and it shouldn't be limited to KCA. We must remember also there are moribund public institutions that have seen collapsed, and therefore nobody can lay claim. There's KPCU, Kenya Railways, you know, that are institutions that don't have the kind of power that KCA has. Therefore, the debate should be what are contested private properties that are on public land. That's a whole discussion.
All right. In March, I remember also Ipsos carried a survey, and Ruto came up as the most preferred presidential candidate for 2022. We wonder why then there was no consultation about this particular survey. But when it touches on corruption, right? We know everyone is blowing their gasket. But if Ruto we know, he has actually claimed that he is running for presidency in 2022. The question then will be, every Kenyan wants to know if he's a corrupt leader. And if that is a perception, then it warrants our discussion of Ruto here in the program as well, isn't it?
Yes, so it does. It does, and let me chip in. I listened to Uhuru and Ruto sound very angry about them being referred to as corrupt.
Yes.
I think Ruto has got more political experience than myself, but my advice to him would be that he should not go that route of saying, I'll take people to court and all this. If he remains in the race, he should expect that and much more. After all, you've seen even in the US, people like Trump, women were coming up and saying he raped them and all manner of things. That is a part and parcel of the game we call politics. Allow me to comment on a thought by Honorable Jakoyo. Jakoyo is saying that Ruto should surrender all his titles and all his properties and go back to chicken selling. Can I? You spoke. People heard you. If I'm misquoting you, they'll take the same. You said that. But let me tell you, Jakoyo. Yes, Jakoyo, let me tell you. If that is the route you want to take, then the same would apply to President Kenyatta, where people would say, surrender everything called Kenyatta and go back to what you met as a meter reader in Nairobi City Council. You would go to the Moi family and say, surrender all that you have and go back to what Moi met as a P1 teacher. You would go to Wamatangi and tell Wamatangi's children that surrender everything Wamatangi has, go back to the days when we used to be in a famous bus with Wamatangi driving, going to Western, a bus called Mbukinya. You know, we have come from very far. We've come from very far. Wamatangi, tell this young man.
Actually, no, I just wanted to remind you. Yes. It was not called Bukinya, it was Takwenya.
Takwenya, sorry. Takwenya.
Yeah. So, and of course, I was driving you as an entrepreneur.
That's right. Okay.
Why are you repeating my story, man?
Please. So, Mheshimiwa Jakoyo.
Yeah, I'm listening.
We approach this matter of land in the manner you are suggesting and in the manner in which Amolo is suggesting that the authority on this should be Captain Kide, then we lose it. It is purely because of that kind of approach that the new constitution created a commission called the National Land Commission with the sole mandate that it should protect the sovereignty of the people of Kenya on matters land. So that is the institution that we should respect. Let me ask you, Jakoyo. If you go that route, are you not saying that the Kenyatta family should surrender all the land that Kenyatta owned after he became president? Are you not saying that the Moi family should do the same? Are you not saying that Raila Odinga should surrender Kisumu molasses? I mean, that is not a route to go.
All right. Let's hear from Otiende. We'll come to you. As also we are preparing your headline thoughts.
First of all, it is true that as politicians, and on that I agree with Senator Cheruiyot, you will always be accused of everything and anything. I mean, that happens to all of us. But as a politician, when the accusation is made, you don't say, you who is saying, prove it. As a politician, and Senator Cheruiyot knows, we go through this all the time. You then go out of your way to demonstrate that what they are alleging is not true. Unfortunately, that is the reality. And as Dr. Lwale says, the DP is a very senior politician, so he knows more than us. That when such statements are made, you don't tell them, prove it. You go out of your way to disprove them. Specifically, on the question of acquisition of riparian land, of road reserves, of land that belongs to the public. In this case, the land that Weston is built on is the land which, for a very long time, I have a letter here of 2002, where these kinds of lands were classified as lands which lie within the approach funnel to the runway. And those approach funnel to the runway are inevitably preserved. Okay? When then the statement is made, you don't say, prove that I didn't acquire it illegally. When you are saying, I think Dr. Lwale was saying that the nation lost the opportunity to ask the DP about, about that land, it should be the converse. Is that because of those perceptions, when you have the opportunity, carry all the documents that you can carry to demonstrate that, ladies and gentlemen, I acquired this land lawfully. The burden of proof lies on you who want to show that you acquired public land lawfully, not on those who are saying otherwise. And that is the bottom line. Having said that, what you just read, Debarl.
Yes.
When the Captain Kibe says what he says, and he does not say on his own behalf, because he was not the managing director then, he is saying based on the records that he has. There is no way Dr. Lwale can say that it lies for him to prove. That is against everything I've ever had Dr. Lwale say over the years. And you know, he's a senior politician who has spoken for the longest time on these matters. And therefore, who should not find himself, for whatever reason, at any time, on the side of those who want to take public property. And I agree with you.
Thank you.
For me, everyone who takes public property should be recovered. However, the point is this.
Your headline thoughts as well.
Yes,
This is, please,
yes.
because it's time.
My headline thought is this. When I was ombudsman, one of the things we did, and I did various reports, at least 15. I'll tell you only about one. In Machakos prison, the same thing. Some people went inside the prison, took public land within the prison, converted it into private land, and constructed at least 22 houses. They used the gate of the main prison, and yet it is private property. When we investigated, we discovered, and one of those who had bought for good measure was a public officer. When she realized that, she brought the title deed to us and said, I bought this thing at so much million, about 12 million.
Thank you.
But this public land, I give it back. That's what the DP should do to help Captain Kibe.
All right, thank you. Giacomo Dio, your headline thoughts?
Yeah. Well, Utinde has said everything. Fortunately, no, he has to pass my home before he goes to his home. So we are bright like that. But what I'm saying, if even NEMA says that the land, I mean the hotel, encroaches, I mean, should it be of good sense of the DP just to surrender it?
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're strapped for time.
No. Why? We have time.
No, we don't have time. We're strapped for time. Your headline
what
thoughts.
I wanted to say.
Yes, please.
What I wanted to say. You cannot criminalize poll agencies. You cannot.
Thank you. Kimano Matangi, your headline thoughts?
Yeah, sure.
Briefly.
I mean, based on our discussion this morning, Debarl, I want to be on record as having said clearly that indeed we have to sustain, we have to keep the momentum on the fight against corruption. This must be won, and what we have to do is fight it unforgivingly and make sure that we win it. But we should also need to make sure that the fight against corruption is not hijacked also for purposes of either political expediency or for purposes of settling scores. You know, because if then we let that agenda be lost in that vote, then we lose the whole fight.
Right, thank you. Yeah. All right, thank you very much. 30 seconds.
Just in one word.
Oh,
I think, Amolo, you are misleading Jacoyo.
30 seconds, sir.
Yes. You should be educating Jacoyo that in law, you guys say the burden of proof lies with he who alleges.
In court. No. Thank you.
Just a minute. 1 minute. Can you guys keep quiet? Keep quiet. I want to finish.
Became a politician. No, 30 seconds.
Can you keep quiet, man? Anyway, and finally, I want to use this opportunity, to send my deepest condolences to the family of Dr. Stefano Jacob Maleche, who was a surgeon in Kakamega and who has taught many of us young doctors.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Lastly, 30 seconds.
There's just one observation I want to make. By the standards of the Odingas, the Mois, the Kenyatas, the Mudavadis, William Ruto is a very poor man.
Why the obsession with this very little that he owns?
Right.
Is there a list?
Thank you.
Is there a list of what people who should own property in this country? Tell us that list.
All right. Thank you very much. And I can see a lot of tweets. I won't read them here. But very interestingly also, Mheshimiwa David saying things that actually I'm biased. He's saying that you're biased, you're seeking agenda to feed certain interests. It is very unfortunate this morning. And of course, I know this is also many of the reactions of many people. But this is a discussion that we need to have in this country. And of course, if there's a poll out there, why can't we interrogate it? And if Deputy William Ruto wants to become the president of Kenya, it's only fair that also we see if he is clear and he can really pass muster as far as leadership and integrity is concerned. Thank you very much for your valued company. Living with us is up next. My name is Debarl Inea.